Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and tonight we're going to be joined by R.B. Ham. He's got a great podcast called Beyond the Pale, and I'm newly familiar with it. I've seen his posts on Facebook before. Craig has introduced me to this gentleman, very fascinating guy up there in Canada, and here's something I didn't know until the other day. He actually ran for the Canadian Parliament. How many people out there can say they know somebody that ran for the Canadian Parliament? So we're going to be learning more about him today, but first let me bring our co-host on. This is Mr. Craig McKee. Add to the stage. There he is. Whoops. Hold on. Well, we got RB already ahead of time here. This is screwing up my whole presentation here, but let's just go ahead and get them on the screen. We're going to put Craig here.
I like that. I like it when I'm big. Yeah.
I know. Well, I always thought too, if somebody starts saying something I don't like, I wish I could just start shrinking the box smaller and smaller as it goes on. But Craig, thank you for joining us. And this is Mr. R.B. Ham. As I was saying, let me give him the formal introduction there. This is Richard Brent Richingham, Winteringham. He'll correct me in a second. Better known as R.B. Ham. He is an activist and podcast host and a former candidate for the Canadian Parliament. His show is Beyond the Pale, and we're going to be learning all about his exploits in the next hour. So, RB, thank you so much for joining us here on 9/11 Freefall.
Well, thanks for having me, Andy, and thanks for joining Craig. Me and Craig have known each other for 20 years, basically online. I've never met him in purpose. He lives in person. He lives in Montreal, and I live in Saskatoon. It's our physical paths with him across, but we've been frequent commenters online to each other and stuff ever since 9/11 happened. I'm one of those OG 9/11 truthers. On the day it was happening, I knew it was an inside job because I was witnessing controlled demolitions. And I used to know some people who worked in that field, and I knew that to get a building to fall in on its own footprints at free fall speed, you first got to blow out the supports so that there's no resistance. And the whole pancake theory completely is ridiculous. It's impossible, physically impossible. And of course, with with the architects and engineers from 9/11 Truth, with what that fella did up at the University of Fairbanks, Alaska, they've proven it beyond a shadow of a doubt. And of course, the NIST study is so flawed it beggars belief. And I've just got a grade 12 education, and I know that, right? You don't have to be a genius. Actually, I have 1 year of university. I dropped out my first year of university because I couldn't afford to go anymore, and I went to work. So anyway, but and the whole thing around 9/11, what really gets me is that it's so obvious, right? It's something that's so obvious, and the psychological manipulation of the public that they use to make people buy it goes all the way back to all you have to do is, like, in high school, I read Edward Bernays' book Propaganda that he wrote in 1920 or 28 in that area. And he wrote the book Propaganda. I read it in high school. So I don't know. And then in high school, back in those days, like, I'm 62 years old, we took 1984, George Orwell by 1984 in grade 11 English class, right? This stuff was discussed openly, and I think our generation is more attuned to it and awake to propaganda techniques, and what was happening surrounding 9/11 and everything obviously showed that in spades, up to and including all the anomalies, of course, on that day. Where did the air, not just aside from the two buildings falling in on their own footprints, World Trade Center 7, which of course the 9/11 Commission completely omitted, never talked about, which is really weird. And what happened at the Pentagon, where, the most secure building in the world, surrounded with all these cameras, can't capture a plane flying into the building. And then the first CNN reporter on the scene goes on there and says, there's no evidence of a plane ever hit this building, of course, and everything gets memory holed and propagandized later. But if you were watching on that day, all the things that were happening, they were talking about secondary explosions. The firemen were talking about how the floors seemed to be blowing out one by one. I mean, and then of course the Let's Roll, that other plane that supposedly crashed in Shanksville, that whole Let's Roll scenario was so impossible and such a production. Yeah. It was obviously a psychological operation.
Well, I don't know. What about the guy that was in town for the Harley Davidson convention on the street telling you exactly the official story on the day of, I mean, That is a very normal interview, I'll tell you, right on the street.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you, and God bless you for being out there and putting out this information for so long. Craig, you were going to say something, and you were saying that you and Craig had, you guys know each other. I just assumed that every Canadian knew each other.
That's right. That's right. Do you know Dave from Canada? Yeah.
Oh, Dave, yeah, he's a good guy.
That was actually a joke in a beer commercial some time ago. Like, where's an American guy says, to another Canadian guy, Bob from Canada? Like, sure, Bob. Yeah, I know Bob. Anyway, I'm just curious before we kind of get rolling, since we have probably a primarily American audience, why don't you tell people, like, you're from Saskatoon?
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? Why don't you tell people, like, what the heck Saskatoon is? Because probably a lot of people south of the border are not all that familiar.
Well, Saskatchewan is a place right in the middle of the bald prairie here in Saskatchewan. And that's why there's so many flat earthers here in Saskatchewan, because when you see your dog run away, you can watch it run away for 4 days. We are in the middle of the flatness. And middle of the bald prairie. But in Saskatchewan it's a very tall province. It's shaped like a long rectangle. And at the very north of the province is just incredible green foliage and tons of lakes, and the Canadian Shield is up there, and it's just beautiful country, but you can only access it 3 to 4 months of the year. The rest of the time it's almost inaccessible, and you have to go on ice roads to get to the top of the province. And the bottom of the province in the southeast corner is like the desert. Around the southeast corner, the southwest corner of the province is where we have pronghorn antelopes and rattlesnakes and black widow spiders. And on the southeast corner of the province is the beginning of the move into the Manitoba and Ontario, where, of course, it's also like very, very wet. It rains all the time and floods all the time. So we got everything. If you go from the north of the province to the south of the province, you go through about 4 different areas of the ecosystem. It's that crazy. So we have some rolling hills, but we don't have any mountains. The only mountain we have when we in 1969 when Saskatchewan hosted the Canadian Games, we had to build our own mountain. It's called Tabletop Mountain. And another one called Blackstrap Mountain. We basically had to build 2 mountains out of refuse and ground so we could have skiing. So man-made mountain and a man-made lake. We have also Blackstrap Lake is also a man-made lake stocked with trout and jackfish. So farmers can drive up there and off the berm, they can just cast their rods and catch fish all day. It's kind of funny.
That sounds beautiful. We have mountains here, and they're right outside my window. And in the last couple of years, the town allocated the land, and now there's a giant warehouse blocking half the mountains. And now there's a U-Haul storage area that's like really big that's going to be blocking the other half. So that's my view coming up in the next couple of years, is just the sides of walls where previously I had these mountains coming up.
Well, my dream is to retire to the mountains in British Columbia. It's so beautiful out there, and when I go out there to visit my family or whatever for vacations and stuff, and I come back from British Columbia, leave the mountains, come back to the bald flat prairie, I go, oh no, it's so depressing living in this province. Sometimes, I'm telling you. Plus, we have absolutely backward political thinking here, and during the 9/11 COVID tyranny, Saskatchewan was the worst. We had 28. If you broke the COVID health rules, you got $2,800 fines, and I ended up getting 8 tickets for $45,000. And because I was one of those guys was out protesting.
What did you do with them?
The Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I retained them as my lawyers. We fought it in court and we lost because the judges here are politically appointed and they won't go against the public health dictates. Whatever public health says was the rules, and no other countervailing information is allowed. Any other evidence from doctors or public health officials that said that the COVID-19 virus was not deadly and everything was disproportionate. They just threw it out and said it's moot because what public health says is the law. So It doesn't matter. They don't have to. In our Constitution, it says if you want to enact an emergency, you have to demonstrably prove that emergency is that you need to invoke that emergency because there's no other choice. But it was never demonstrably proven. We never went. There was no parliamentary. People didn't sit around and debate it in the parliament. There was no input into the public. What do you guys think? It was just bang. This is the rule, and if you don't like it, too bad. And it's going on. And I said, and one of my things I used to say during those times when I was making my speeches and trying to educate people about this is saying, well, if the government can declare an emergency whenever they want, they'll just keep declaring emergencies whenever they want to keep the power and control. And I said, it's all about power and control. And look what's happening. I predicted climate change lockdowns back then. I said, they're coming. And now we have the province of Nova Scotia enacting $25,000 fines for anybody walking in the woods because it might lead to wildfires.
Really? I have not heard that. Wait, you can get fined for walking in the woods. There's no more to it than that?
The Conservative Premier, Tim Houston in Nova Scotia, just 2 days ago enacted an emergency act under the Forests Act in their province, saying that if anybody is found walking in the woods unauthorized, you have to have a permit to go there. So, I mean, there are people that have to work in the woods. So they have to get a permit to go work in the woods. And if you don't have a permit, they can give you a $25,000 fine for unauthorized walking in the woods, unauthorized hiking.
Yeah. You were talking about your dream and your retirement and everything. Mine is to actually get like a cabin in the woods and spend the day walking in the woods, like at least twice a day with the dog and everything. So, I mean, if they ever enact that here, I am screwed. Okay, so I was a young man on 9/11, right? And so for me, it feels like, I was living in light before. I know that the world wasn't perfect before that, but it feels like all of this stuff kind of started on that day. It seemed like the biggest scandals going on before that were OJ and, Tanya Harding and that stuff. And then all of a sudden we had 9/11 and it was just like everything started going into hyperdrive with the tyranny where the news is actually reaching into your own life. What's happening on that screen, you're feeling the effect of it. Do you have that same perception? I know you're older than me, or do you feel that we were always on this road to not being able to walk in the woods?
Well, they were laying the groundwork for it many times before that. I think, boy, if you really want to look at it, it goes right back to Operation Chaos in the 1960s when the CIA used Operation Chaos to discredit the hippie movement, the anti-war movement, and Charles Manson being a CIA asset and that whole thing that happened out there. That was one of the beginnings to it. And then later on, they had the Oklahoma City bombing, which was an inside job, of course, right? So they were leading the pathway to it. 9/11 was the big traumatic event, and it was a massive psychological operation, that traumatic event writ large, because they had been practicing, their MK Ultra trauma-based mind control stuff for decades before that, and they had gotten to the point. People don't understand how they've perfected this to a point where they can use it on the public in a broad sense. And that's what 9/11 was. And all the attacks after that, including the 7/7 in London, all those so-called attacks by Muslims in Europe, in Nice, and in Brussels, and in Paris at the Bataclan Theater, all these massive psychological operations that were misrepresented as Muslim terrorists to try to get to psychologically manipulate the Western public into going along with this war of civilizations against the Islamic world. We got to go and we have to fight them over there, so we can't fight them over here, turning people's minds off to the broader implications. Because remember, the Patriot Act was already written and ready when 9/11 happened. And I remember writing a piece on bartcop.com and on Democratic Underground at the time when I was a prolific blogger, and I wrote, this is exactly the same thing that Hitler did in 1933 with the Reichstag fire. Don't you see this, people? They have the Enabling Act. The Germans had the Enabling Act, and it was the exact same thing as the Patriot Act, where now all of a sudden the government has the right to declare anybody they want a terrorist, and they can throw you in prison for as long as they want, because all they need is the suspicion of terrorism. And then, of course, we had the black sites and the torture program going on after that. It was just so obvious. I can't see why people can't see it. But I guess I don't know. I read books. It's a combination of 1984, George Orwell's 1984. It's a combination of that, along with Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, along with with Aldous Huxley's A Brave New World, and and the stuff that what's his face, the guy who wrote The Time Machine, what's his name again?
H.G. Wells.
Oh, H.G. Wells, yeah.
H.G. Wells wrote about it, and they produced a film. I forget, it's called the Future Yet to Come. All these things have been planned out in these secret society networks. They let the public know what they're going to do. It's called Revelation of the Method. Here's what we're going to do. And because we've told you, we're going to psychologically manipulate you. And if you're not smart enough to figure out what we're doing, it's on you, boys. That's what's going on.
Well, I'll tell you what, it's always fascinated me, and I always stick to science, but what always fascinated me is that in 2001, I went to China, and right before I went to China, me and my friend went to the movies, and the big summer blockbuster was Pearl Harbor. And there is this scene in Pearl Harbor, and maybe I had to close out the show if I can find it on YouTube with this, where FDR, now he never actually gave the speech as far as I can tell. I've tried to look this up, never gave this speech to his cabinet members, but he's talking about how we've been attacked unexpectedly, unprovoked, that America is on its knees right now. And for some reason, his cabinet members are trying to argue that the United States can't launch a counterattack against Japan, which the reasoning behind that I don't really get. I mean, we absolutely could, but they're trying to argue that we can't do it. We're too weak. And FDR, to show the spirit of America, stands up out of his wheelchair and on shaky legs. He says, "This is the spirit of America." I mean, his secretary gasped at this display of courage. And it's just so strange that this movie and that scene comes out a few months before the actual real show happens.
No,
In September.
What's even stranger is, you remember the X-Files. They had a film called The Lone Gunman. It was an offshoot of that program, and the very first program they did, which was about 6 months before 9/11, was a plot around a government agency taking hold of a plane, remote control, and flying it into the World Trade Centers to get the public behind a war of civilizations against Middle Eastern dictators. I mean, And of course, Bill Cooper. And at the time, I'm a little weird, and way back in the 1990s when I was truck driving, I would tune into Art Bell every night. Right, 90% of what Art Bell was presenting with the ghosts and the UFOs and all that stuff, I kind of saw through. It's fun and it's entertaining, but it's pretty wild. But every once in a while, there'd be some real stuff that would filter through there, especially the stuff about the deep state they were talking about then, the CIA. MK Ultra was all starting to come out then. That's when it was all starting to happen. And the chemtrail stuff started coming out in 1999. And as a truck driver, I saw them. I noticed these chemtrails going this. So they've been doing the chemtrails for 25 years, by the way. I started noticing in 1998, 1999. So there's some truth that comes out. And Alex Jones, I was also watching at that time, and the same thing, 90% bullshit, but a little bit of truth. And you got to be able to discern which is real and which isn't. And of course, Alex Jones famously predicted 9/11. But what they don't tell you is that Bill Cooper is the one who did it first. And Alex Jones stole all his stuff from William Cooper. And William Cooper warned us about Alex Jones, calling him controlled opposition then, saying, "Watch out, this guy's a charlatan. He's taking my stuff, and he's trying to direct people's attentions away. He's going to try to move the truth movement into a conservative reactionary element where he's being used by the deep state to keep that." And when it was all came true when he came out and endorsed Donald Trump. Remember when Donald Trump first ran for president, he went on the Alex Jones show. Can you imagine something that 20 years ago, a presidential candidate going on a conspiracy theorist podcast? It was just, I go, okay, it's all come true. Whatever. I was warning Mike Malloy at the time about that, because I was a frequent contributor to his web show, and he would read my essays on the air. And I warned them. I said, after 9/11, I said, if the populist left does not grab onto this and make sure that it's steered in the right direction, we're going to have a very, very, very ugly scene coming along in 20 years, when the right wing element grabs onto the truth movement and steers it into a reactionary way, where it's going to be very, 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 very dangerous for the rest of society, because they will justify the police state through that, and they'll use things like immigration, which they're doing now, and all that. So it's easy to see.
It's interesting. Trump started off with a lot of bells and whistles with the executive orders about JFK and declassifying things and seemingly against the deep state. And then it seems that at a certain point, things fell off. Suddenly, Israel is our bestest friend in the whole wide world, and we're attacking Iran inexplicably. I don't even know if I want to touch the Epstein files stuff, but that's pretty disturbing.
We have that. I don't think we have the time to get into everything, but I understand what you're talking about. Yeah, I mean, I knew Donald Trump was controlled by the deep state because when he went bankrupt in the 1990s, who bailed him out? Wilbur Ross. Who did Wilbur Ross work for? The Rothschilds. And when Trump became president, he made Wilbur Ross his minister of the Secretary of the Treasury. So, whoa, there you go, right? Come on. And so he's acted as a Shabbos goy quite publicly for the for Jewish people. He goes and does the ceremonies. He's been to the wall, put on the kippah, touched the wall, kissed the wall. He's owned lock, stock, and barrel. When Netanyahu comes to the White House to drop off his laundry and pick up the Epstein files, Donald Trump holds the chair out for him and pushes it in for him. And this whole public stuff that, sometimes Trump is frustrated and upset with Netanyahu. That's just for the public's consumption. He is owned lock, stock, and barrel by the Zionist the Zionist Israeli right. Lock, stock, and barrel. Before Miriam Adelson gave him his $200 million for this campaign last time, Sheldon Adelson gave him all that money for his campaign. And he not inexplicably, but he did move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem then. And he also gave, and I don't know how the United States of America can give a part of Syria to Israel.
Yeah.
But he did. He recognized their claim on the Golan Heights, which they illegally took in the 1967 war and had been illegally holding on to ever since. And he's now turning a blind eye. He took sanctions off the settlers in the West Bank who are now rampaging through the West Bank, killing people left and right, destroying cities, kicking Christians out of Christian areas too. It doesn't matter if they're Christians or not. They killed 2 American citizens in the last couple of weeks. There's been 2 American citizens that were beaten to death. But Mike Huckabee says that's okay. And then they bombed a Catholic church in Gaza. And Mike Huckabee says, you shouldn't do that. Oh, it was a mistake. Sorry. Oops. I don't know if the Pope had any balls, he would go down there himself and to Gaza to see what was going on. But he sent his emissary, Cardinal Pete Zabala, who should have been a Pope, so we could have a Pope Pete Zabala. But anyway, he went down there and expressed his concern and whatever. But it's too late now. I mean, Gaza's a parking lot. It's now going to be occupied by the IDF. Yeah. They're going to try to eliminate all the evidence that shows how they were. They're doing a genocide there, and they're going to take over the West Bank. They're going to take parts of Syria. They're going to take parts of Lebanon because it's all part of the Greater Israel Project, which the IDF soldiers wear a badge on a map of the Greater Israel right on their shirts. And so when people take to talk about, this is just poor little Israel defending themselves, give me a break. I mean, all you have to do is read a book, Elon Pape's book about the Nakba, what happened in 1948. And Elon Pape is an Israeli historian. Read his book. The scales fall from your eyes. You know what's really going on.
Well, I think for a lot of people who are watching the show, the cat's out of the bag on the Israel thing it's the only country that's actually been caught staging a false flag against the United States. I mean, people can Google the Levant affair and learn about that. It's kind of difficult with Trump. See, I took a lot of flack from friends because my choices that I was given was Trump or Kamala Harris. And at the time, it was like they were doing everything they could to instigate a war with Russia. And so I said, well, at least Trump is expressing concern on these debates. So I voted for Trump. And the people around me who didn't like him, they didn't like him for reasons that I didn't consider valid or even true and everything. So I wanted to be hopeful. I wanted to try to make America great again. But, the events in the last couple of months has me really kind of, rethinking that entire approach. And frankly, but there's a lot of hope on him in the 9/11 truth movement. We still want to get a presidential commission established, and we're still going to rally for that. But I mean, a lot of people watching this show right now have invested that hope, believing that Trump is a truther. I've had people write me emails saying that. I was skeptical as to whether he was a truther, but actually, I don't know, what do you have to say to them?
Well, way back on 9/11, Donald Trump famously went on, I think it was ABC, he was talking to the local ABC or CBS affiliate, talking about how that's what they're talking, that the Twin Towers are made out of concrete and steel, and there's no way that a plane could knock them down. And he was talking about there have to be bombs inside the building. He's a 9/11 truther. He's not stupid. Donald Trump knows the truth. He knows that the 9/11 was an inside job. He knows that the Mossad was involved. He knows that Saudi Arabia was involved. He knows that that MI6 was involved. He knows the CIA was involved. He knows that the German intelligence were involved. They all knew what was happening. But it doesn't matter, because now that he's in the position of power that he is, his main job there is now to deflect, because we can't have the truth coming out, because I forget, it was I think it was Bill Ackman or something saying something about that. If people really knew the truth, the nations would fall. The Western civilization would fall. Our ability to make war in the Middle East would fall. We would lose, everything would come crashing down, because everything is connected, from Epstein to 9/11 to the COVID thing. Everything is connected to this deep state program, which is to bring about a new world order. And what they want, and the biggest thing in their way with this new world order plan is the United States Constitution and their Bill of Rights, because it's the only document that gives people an inalienable right to liberty. That it comes from God, not from the government. So that's what they're trying to get rid of. They're trying to destroy that, and they've been doing it incrementally ever since with the Patriot Act. But they keep picking away at it, and they use these false flag events to keep taking away your civil liberties, keep imposing more censorship. And it's rolled out in an incremental way, but they have to have these fat flash events to really push it, where they can shut the people's minds off to go along with their patriotic instinct to stand up and fight. And you can see that how Trump with the Butler, Pennsylvania thing, that was so staged, it was so obvious. I mean, I don't know how people can fall for that, especially when they have the Keystone Cops, as the security team, and of course the killer is up on a sloped roof, but the whole sloped roof thing, and the shooters and the Secret Service snipers are already there trained on him, but they wait till after he takes the shot to shoot him. And if that even is true, and if Corey Compertor really was killed, why did they spell his name wrong at the rally later on at the presidential when he gets inaugurated as the Republican, and the cult of the bandage on the ear, and it was so obvious to me, right out of Bob Roberts. If you ever watched the movie Bob Roberts, it's just so obvious to me. But people go along.
You're talking about, as people come into the presidency, they just have to deflect, and it's such a good example of the irony of power. People think, if I became president, I could just do this and do that. Everybody's had to sit through their drunk uncle saying, this is, if I was president, this is how I would do things. And I always said Trump was sort of like that. It's like the drunk uncle talking about what he would do if he was president, and then he actually becomes president and he's doing some of it. But at the same time, though, you become more restricted in what you can do. I remember when George Bush, this was the second George Bush, was president, and he was at some kind of speech in China. And this thing was very choreographed. He gives the speech, and then he's supposed to turn and go out a door, and he must have went out the wrong door, and it was locked, and he didn't know what to do, so he stands at attention. And I thought, well, you're the president of the United States. Like, who cares if the door is locked? Just walk across the stage. I would have just made a joke about it and asked where the right door was, But they're so nervous because they're so handled. I remember when Gore was running for president, and it was just the most bizarre imagery I saw of him dancing with Tipper, and they're the only people in the room dancing, and then there's people with cameras all around them. And I thought, this is just so anti-human. Like, we have to strip away everything that makes these people human to get them into that office. No wonder they're so tenderized to just go along. And who knows what they say to you when you get there, Well,
I think Bill Hicks said it best in one of his bits. Bill Hicks, the famous comedian who died of a brain tumor just about the time Alex Jones became prevalent. And there's the old Bill Hicks. There's a Bill Hicks, Alex Jones conspiracy theory you guys got to look into. It's kind of unique.
I've seen that.
If I ever get to the point where I'm just a shill, I'm going to sell orange drink. And what does Alex Jones do? He sells orange drink. But anyway, that's not a good deal. But Bill Hicks said that when a president does get elected, he's shown into a back office by people in dark suits and black sunglasses. He sat down and he's shown a part of the Zapruder film that nobody else gets to see.
Yeah.
For now we own your ass, because this is what's going to happen to you if you don't do exactly as we say.
Yeah.
So
so we're talking about politicians. We're talking about politicians. You actually ran for parliament, and I want to hear all about it. We're getting joined by the dog.
Sorry about that. Yes, I've got company.
Yes. So
talk about that.
When the COVID thing first happened, and I started protesting against it back in when it first happened. I'm trying to reflect. So it was 2020, right? 2020. And I went out to the streets with my megaphone there, and I started trying to educate people, yelling through my megaphone, your immune system is not a conspiracy theory. And I met with some like-minded people, and at the very start of our movement, there was 9 or 12 people out there. By a few months later, once they started introducing the mandates and restrictions, we got to a couple thousand. But at that point, I met this guy on the street, and his name was Mark Friesen, the grizzly patriot, and he was a right winger. He was affiliated with this party called the People's Party of Canada, which I'd never even heard of. And I went, oh my God. If I had heard about them, I was probably believing what the CBC and the CTV were telling me about them. They were some kind of right-wing fascist party. But the more I looked into it, it was a party that was formed by Maxime Bernier, who got screwed out of the Conservative nomination in 2018 or so, and 2016, and decided to start his own party because he thought that the Conservative Party here in Canada had become morally and intellectually bad. And so he started his own party, and it was very small.
Not now, no.
So this Mark Friesen guy had run for the party back in their very first election in 2018, and we started getting together, and we started talking, because I'm a left winger. I'm an old time lefty. I'm a socialist, for crying out loud. My hero growing up was Tommy Douglas, who here in Saskatchewan is like a god. He's the father of Medicare in Canada. That's why we have universal health care in this country, is because he got it into the province here in Saskatchewan, and it became so popular that every other province did it. And for instance, I've got a story to tell you about Medicare, and just to make this real short, about our universal healthcare system here in Canada. About 3 weeks ago, when I was in Winnipeg, loading a load of steel, I started feeling very, very faint and very, very short of breath, and I almost passed out. And the plant foreman saw that. The steel plant foreman saw that. He came and got me, took me to the nurse, the company nurse. Took my blood pressure. Oh my God, whatever. They drove me to the hospital. Turned out my hemoglobin level was at 40, and I was very anemic. And what had happened, what was going on is I'm a truck driver, and I have something that a lot of truck drivers have, and it starts with an H, ends with an S. You know what it is, right? The Ring of Fire. And so I've been losing so much blood the last few months that I had lost all this. I'd become very anemic and stuff, and so I was almost bad. So they had to give me a blood transfusion. And so 4 pints of, I was in the hospital for 2 nights. I got 4 pints of blood transfusion, had to do all kinds of lab work and blood taken and stuff like that. And they got me back on my feet. And you know how much it cost me to do all that? $0.
How much? Okay.
$0. Because our healthcare system takes care of that, because we pay our taxes into our healthcare system. And it's not the most perfect healthcare system. There's long waiting times to see a specialist, because now I have to go see a surgeon for my problem, but I won't be able to get in there till September. And my next doctor's appointment isn't until late August. So because he's got like 2,000 patients, right? So there is some problems to our healthcare system as far as wait times and everything goes. But the fact is that if I had been an American and the same thing had happened to me, it might have cost me 20-30 grand out of pocket.
Yeah.
Even if you have insurance in the United States, even if you have private insurance, a lot of things they won't cover it, right? They'll find excuses not to cover it. Jimmy Dore talks about this all the time. There's Jimmy right there. I'll be going to his show in Edmonton in August 28th, August 26th.
We're very familiar with him. We got a lot of fans of Jimmy Dore.
And
I know.
Harvey had him on his show recently.
Yeah, I had him on my show, and he had me on his show last January talking about my COVID Give, Send, Go ticket.
Great.
Yeah, so anyway, so Tommy Douglas was one of my heroes. Martin Luther King was one of my heroes. Nelson Mandela was one of my heroes. I'm a lefty, and so I met this right-wing guy named Mark Fries, and we started comparing notes, going, well, we agree on more than we agree more than what we disagree on, and the things we do disagree on, we can work it out. For instance, he said he didn't think government could work for big projects. I said, well, Dwight D. Eisenhower, the greatest Republican president of all time, used public works to build a series of highways that opened up the West to the American middle class. Yeah, government can work if it's not corrupt and if it's overseen by people of good faith, but not the way government is now, which is so corrupt and overseen by people that have no scruples. I mean, it is what you put into it. And back in the day, I remember back in the late 1960s, early 1970s here in Saskatchewan, the biggest day of the year was when the budget would come out. And a week after the budget came out, everybody would watch their TV screens because the ombudsman would come out, and he'd come up with the figures going, okay, here's what the budget says. This is what we have the money for. Here's the shortfalls. And everybody was involved. The community was involved in those days because we didn't have the internet. We didn't have all the distractions. People weren't working 2 or 3 jobs just to make ends meet. We had better union representation back in the day where people could make a good living with the union representation, and they had disposable income. Everybody went on holidays to the lake every year. Everybody had 2-3 weeks off. We didn't have the homeless problems that we had back then. Sure, we had bums and everything, but we had good social programs back then. This is the 1960s and 70s. It would take care of these things. It's all blown out of proportion now, and so we don't have the public involvement nowadays to keep our elected officials under wraps. Journalism is no longer the great investigative journalism that we used to have back in the 60s and 70s. Nowadays, they're just stenographers for power. It's just ridiculous, especially what's going on with, as you can see, what's going on right now with Russiagate, all the revelations coming out, but the New York Times, the Washington Post are still defending what they did to Trump. Getting back and then coming full circle back to that. So I realized I became a member for the People's Party, a member of the PPC. And the very first election that I was involved in was back in 2021 during the COVID hysteria. And we almost got 1 million votes, but I didn't run for the PPC. I was the campaign manager for Kevin Boychuk in Saskatoon West. And we got 6.4% of the vote. Because of what was going on in COVID, we had a really good push behind us, people realizing what was going on, the tyranny and stuff. We were the only party speaking out against vaccine mandates and vaccine passports. Nobody else would touch it. This last election, though, then the Freedom Convoy happened right after that election, right? Yep. And the Freedom Convoy was one of the greatest mass peaceful protests of all time, right up there with the Martin Luther King civil rights movement, right up there with Mahatma Gandhi's civil rights movement in India, nonviolent, and they cracked down on it, of course. But when they did that, they became so unpopular doing that amongst the conservative base that here in Saskatchewan and then eventually every other province, they dropped all the mandates restrictions, boom, 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 because they realized it was no good. And conservative politicians finally came out of the woodworks and said, okay, we got to stop this because we're losing our base and the donations are drying up. And so they dropped all the mandates, restrictions, and everybody went back to sleep. All these people that were supporting the Freedom Convoy and our Freedom Convoy movement at that time all went back to sleep. So this last election was last year, and I ran for the PPC in Saskatoon South. I became a candidate. We only got 0.6% of the vote this time because all the people that were supporting us went back to supporting the Conservatives, Pierre Poilievre, because they believed that we had to because we couldn't split the vote. And you've heard that in the United States where people won't support Jill Stein and the Green Party. The Democrats say, don't you dare, you'll split the vote. And it's just like voting for Trump if you vote for Jill Stein. Same thing happened back with Gore and Bush. Remember, don't vote for Nader or else you get Bush.
Nader.
Happened with Ross Perot. Don't vote for Ross Perot or you get Clinton in. So that's what happened this last time. We only got we got demolished. We only got 200,000 votes compared to the 900,000 got last time, and we were just demolished, and we didn't get any seats or nothing. And of course, people are now going, now people are upset because Pierre Poilievre isn't
the guy he thought he was. He lost his own seat. Now they're parachuting him into Alberta for by-election. But the whole thing is, it's people.
Yeah, he's the conservative leader, for those who don't know.
Yeah, he's the conservative leader, but in the United States, he'd be a liberal.
Yeah.
he completely he did not support the Freedom Convoy. He won't stand up against. He won't talk about the vaccine injuries. He won't talk about how corrupt public health is. He's all for mass immigration. We need more direct flights to Armstrong. We got to bring in all the Indian immigrants in because we got to fill the jobs, which of course reduces the wages for the people here in Canada. There's a left-wing populist socialist argument against mass immigration, which because it drives down the abilities of the workers to have good pay and good benefits, because because of the competition, if you bring in if you bring in these immigrants who work for pennies on the dollar, of course, destroys the ability for workers to demand a fair wage. And so there is really no opposition. We have a Uni Party in Canada, just like you have a Uni Party in the United States. There's really no opposition. I fought against this. I did my best, but I found it was it's like banging your head against the wall. Half the people say don't split the vote, and the other half people say, why vote at all? There's no point in it. What are you doing? Voting never changes anything anyway. You know, the black-pilled people that they would go and they spend all their ire and hatred on us little guys, just trying to make. I'm on their side. I'm trying to give their thoughts a voice in the political realm, but they hate me for it because. What's the point? You're not going to win anyway. Well, yeah, with that attitude, I won't win because you won't vote for me anyway.
You mentioned something earlier about how people came out in support of the convoys and all of the efforts to roll back the mandates. And then when they did get rolled back, everybody kind of went back to sleep. And this to me, this feels like something supporting a principle I follow myself when I'm trying to come up with plans for activism at AE 9/11 Truth on the 9/11 Truth issue. And it goes back to something my mom once said was, nobody does anything they would rather not do unless they're afraid of something else. And what that means is, when you boil it down, is that something has to get so bad that it affects people personally before they will do anything. And unfortunately for 9/11, for the large majority of the world, unless they lived in New York City on 9/11 or were visiting it, 9/11 happened on television, and people will say that was so sad, that was so terrible, but then, it ended. They were given a story, they moved on. And it's very hard for people to see, how letting a government like as big as the United States government get away with mass murder, with lying about how these buildings came down, and all of the other elements of 9/11, they can't see how that affects them personally, especially 24 years later. And I want to know your thoughts on that. Does it affect people personally if the government gets away with this?
Well, Keaton Weiss of Due Distance said, like, he's a 9/11 truther like we are, and he didn't come to it right away. It was a few years later that he started researching it and coming to that idea, and he started talking to people. And eventually it became clear to him that it doesn't seem to matter how many people know what actually went on, is that they internalize it and say, well, what can I do about it? I'm just me, little old me. I'm up against the great power structure, the deep state, the government. What can I do about it? So why try? Why bother? And plus, if you do that, if you do stick your head above the parapet and actually speak out about it, you get it chopped off, because the government media gatekeepers make sure that you pay a price for it, right? All of a sudden you become less popular. And of course, people may talk about the censorship that happened during the COVID and all that stuff, famously on Twitter and Facebook and Meta. Zuckerberg said the government people would come to him and tell him, you have to blackball these people. People don't realize back on 9/11, the same thing happened. So when 9/11 happened, I was a frequent blogger on Democratic Underground, and so immediately I started writing pieces and opinion articles about what I actually thought happened, and I would point out all the anomalies, all the craziness and stuff. And I was probably one of the very first people that got canceled. I got kicked. I got eventually banned from Democratic Underground after many, many warnings for bringing this up, saying you can't talk about this. You can't talk about it. It's causing dissension and stuff like that. And so I was one of the very first people that got kicked off Democratic Underground because I would not let it go. And they had and I realized that their arguments against what I was saying were facetious, because I would point out things that demanded an answer. They would not answer it. They would just go back, well, it's not it. You have to understand that if they're just incompetent. They're not actually evil and in on it. They're just incompetent and they're stupid and all that stuff. And I said, you can't be that incompetent and stupid unless because if they're, look at the fact that who got fired on 9/11 for the officials who were in charge of the CIA and the Department of Defense and the home, whatever, defending the homeland. Nobody got fired. In fact, the people who were involved in supposedly defending the United States that day, they all got promoted and they all got paid well and moved upward in the power chain for failing so miserably on 9/11. That argues against incompetence. That argues that what happened on 9/11 wasn't something that went wrong. It's something that went right. They wanted it to happen because the people who were involved all were paid off handsomely with promotions. And so, eventually got kicked off Democratic Underground for that. So I did a series of blogs. One was called Truth and Consequences. One was called Beyond the Pale. I did another one called Print Think. And I was quite prolific back in 2000, but around 2005, 2006, 2007, I got less and less views. And I started getting, what's the word I'm looking for? Shadow banned back then. And eventually I just gave up. And now I have writer's block. I can't even write anymore. All I do is podcast because I can't keep a thought in my head when I'm writing anymore because I talk too much. But I found podcasting much easier for me. But what I also discovered is what you're talking about is it's more like people they've been psychologically traumatized as in a mass psychosis kind of way. I think Matthias Desmet talks about mass psychosis formation. So most people, even if they suspect what the truth is, they self-censor themselves. They self-modify themselves into going along with the status quo because it's just easier. And people don't want to lose their jobs. People don't want to lose the harmony of their home. My marriage broke up over 9/11 because I would not let it go. My wife at the time couldn't take it anymore. And plus, even back then, I was against vaccinations. And she went and got our son vaccinated, and he ended up getting autism. And I was irate about it, and she painted me as crazy, some kind of crazy person, and so that's why we ended up getting divorced over that and everything. And then, of course, even though she was my ex-wife during COVID, she stalked me online, and when I would write pieces against the COVID thing, she was for the COVID thing. So I was slimed by her and other people in the media and stuff, and I got fired from my job over it. At the time, I wasn't a truck driver at the time when the COVID thing was happening. I was a school custodian because I'd gotten off the road because of my bad back, and I'd become a janitor at a local elementary school. And I saw what was going on to the kids when I was a school janitor. They were masking them up. They wouldn't let them play sports. They wouldn't play musical instruments. They had little arrows. And these teachers, half of them were on my side saying, this is crazy. The other half loved it because finally these kids were under control. We could find, I had the vice principal come up to me and say, what's great? He pointed at the arrows and he goes, I love these things. Why? The kids have never been so well behaved, he said. It's just great. They just follow the lines. And we had the principal going, like the kids would have to eat their lunch out on the playground, and they did little circles on the chalk. So they chalked little circles on the blacktop, and a kid would have to sit in their own circle, 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet. And we had the principal up there with his mask on, just like this, going, okay. As soon as the kid was done eating, if they didn't put the mask right on, he was like, put that mask back on now that you're done eating, and wouldn't let the kids, play together. It was. So I saw what was going on, and it drove me crazy. Anyway, I ended up getting fired from my job for speaking out against what was going on, because of course the media found out about it, and they did a couple pieces on me in the local newspaper calling me this crazy conspiracy theorists and all that stuff.
They're worried about what the janitor's saying.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I went to a family day in the park because the kids weren't allowed to they weren't allowed to play sports or be in clubs or anything. So our freedom movement out here in Saskatoon, we had a kids day in the park on a Saturday. And we invited all these people who weren't going along with the co-tyranny to bring their kids out. And we had face painting and balloon guys and, the little sports and recreational activities for them and stuff. And the local media just went nuts. Look at these people trying to kill all these kids with their unsafe germs. Oh! And they had my face in. They took a picture of me and put me in the newspaper saying, and this is the ringleader of all this janitor. He's trying to kill all the kids. He's probably not even sanitizing at his high school. I bet you he's, and so, it was just terrible. I ended up getting fired from my job. I had to go back to truck driving, which is which is a horrible way to make a living at my age. But there's things you got to do to survive, and that's what I'm doing. But so I've been through the ringer. I've been through the 9/11 ringer, the censorship ringer. I went through the COVID censorship ringer, and what really gets me is that people can't come together because when the Freedom Convoy went down to Ottawa, and it was cracked down on by the RCMP, and they brought in the horses, and they just with batons and just cracked down on all these peaceful protesters, all these left-wingers who I used to be a left-winger. We're going, yeah, do it. Those crazy right-wing insurrectionists trying to take over the government with, and I was just going, what are you guys doing? Because this is going to come back on you if you support this because it's not your political persuasion. It's going to come back on you. And guess what? It has, because these same people are all the pro-Palestinian protesters, and now they're getting cracked down on. And I'm saying, there you go. And now we have the right-wing freedom movement people cheering that on. Yeah, crack down on those pro-Hamas bastards, those pro-terrorist supporters. And I'm going, you idiots. You're being played left-right dichotomy against each other, and you're cheering on your own demise. You're cheering on the police state that you're welcoming into your lives because your political persuasion is the one doing the oppression. It just boggles my mind why people can't see it. But
what gets me about modern society is how control freak everybody is. Every single individual, not just the systems, but individuals who, like, if somebody has an opinion over there and it's different, let's say that they're a Trump supporter and they put a Trump sign. Now, you may not like Donald Trump, right? But that person's got a right to have it there. If you don't like it, then just don't look at it as you drive by it. It's not affecting your life one way or another. And the same thing, if somebody was a Kamala supporter, I mean, you can, if you don't like her, you can laugh at it as you go by. But I mean, there's people that will actually write to the town and complain about these things.
And it's just hilarious because Trump and let's look at Trump and Clinton. They've been to each other's weddings, right? The Clintons were at Trump's wedding. And when Chelsea was married, Trump's daughter went to their wedding. I think she was one of the best, the maid of honor or whatever. And it's one big club, and you ain't in it, folks. And this is all scam. It was the Clintons that got Trump to run in the first place because they thought they could, he'd be a good guy to put up. And because he used to be a Democrat back in the 80s and the 90s. Trump was a Democrat. In fact, Donald Trump is the very first president of the United States who ever went into office fully in support of gay marriage. People don't realize that. Obama was against it. Clinton was against it. Trump's been at gay marriages, before he became president. It's just amazing how and then, of course, and these right-wing Christian Zionists who glom on to Trump, because they're praying for him and they think he's the next, he's going to help bring about the apocalypse in the Middle East, and they all support what's going on in Israel because once you get enough pile enough bodies high enough in the Middle East, it'll reach to the heavens, and then Jesus can walk down on the bodies, and he'll come back with his flaming sword, and he'll put to death all the non-believers. And if you're a Jew, then God help you.
Is that a real thing? Is that something people believe?
It's part of the rapture. Look into it.
You know, the thing is, anybody who feels like they're not accepted by society, be grateful. You do not want to be accepted by these people out there that make up the mainstream. You know, I became so much happier when I watched less TV. I mean, I'll watch a movie at night before bed or something, and usually Craig recommends it to me, and that's how I found out about it. But you know, I don't really watch the news. I'm around enough people that watch the news that I get the gist of what's going on outside, you know, there. And you are just a happier person, and you're not swallowed by all of this nonsense. Like, I can understand being a fanboy of a musician or a fanboy of a artist or something like that, but you know, being a fanboy of a politician, really? Really? Who? I can't imagine being that enamored with any politician. Now, there'll be politicians I like better than other ones based on what they're saying and all of this stuff, and I'll go and vote because that's what I'm expected to do and what I should do as a citizen. But I'm not going to stand at a rally with a tear in my eye while they're speaking. And there's people that do this, you know? So I don't get it. Now, I'm really into 9/11 truth because I can prove it. You know, This is based on facts, science. There are 3,000 people that died on that day. This is an important issue, not having my side of a political battle win. And this is the thing that always gets me too, is everybody, I don't want to say everybody, it generalizes too much, but you know, a lot of people think that if they can push some kind of ism versus another ism, or one political party versus another political party, this is somehow going to solve things. Look, you know, all of these things, just sort of like what George Carlin said, they're made up of people, right? And I believe all problems begin with people, specifically in their minds. And the problems that plague institutions and groups and movements and stuff are the same evils that have plagued mankind since the beginning of time. They just come in different forms in these different groups. So, you know, it's not about any kind of system. Any kind of ism could work out there if people were perfect angels. The problem is corruption, evil. I'll use that word, and I'm not talking in a spiritual sense. I'm just using it as like, you know, people have very greedy motivations. And that is really where it starts. So I've kind of taken a new focus. I still do the activism with AE 9/11 truth and everything, but I think we really need to deal with the problems that are happening inside people's minds in our society.
Absolutely, it all boils down to the psychology, into understanding your own psychology, understanding that the controllers of the ruling elite view us as little pieces of their algorithm that they can manipulate. That's why they use mass psychological operations like this. That's why they, during COVID, of course, both in England and here in Canada, they had nudge units running the COVID response. Psychological mass behavioral psychologists were running the COVID response, not virologists, not scientists. Behavioral psychologists. How do we get people to comply with these orders through behavioral psychology? And they use people's own sense of virtue against us, right? As Albert Camus wrote in The Plague, the welfare of humanity has always been the alibi of tyrants, and provides the further benefit of giving those servants of tyranny a good conscience.
Well, that is the one to end it on. RB, you are a fascinating guy to talk to. We're going to be having you back on the show. Folks, it is called Beyond the Pale, and what we're going to be doing is in the description of this show, there's going to be a link to the podcast. You can watch it right on Rumble and support this person. Support many people, because I believe that we need to have a lot of voices that aren't just the same standard like and subscribe culture that we are so used to today, that just picks a side, pro-Trump, anti-Trump, and that's what all politics boils down to. We need these independent voices thinking for themselves, getting out there. So support this gentleman here, spread his podcast around, and support other independent media as well. But
I just want to mention one thing. I get the title of my podcast is Beyond the Pale, and where that came from was Tim Russert was interviewing Dick Cheney after 9/11. And Tim Russert brought up, there's a lot of people out there that aren't going along with the official story. And Dick Cheney cut him off and said, "I'm sorry, Tim, but that's beyond the pale."
I forgot about that.
Excellent.
That's where my podcast name comes from. And remember, people, conventional wisdom can only get you so far if you really want to know the truth. Sometimes you have to go beyond the pale.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe. Thanks.